set strict boundaries with my husband to stop his screams, but he claims he'll fail to meet them and our marriage might shatter. I've been married to a smart, sexy, witty, wonderful man for 5 years, dated him for 6 years prior to that, and known him as a friend for 5 years before that. He has been a part of my life for so long it's hard to remember what my life was like before he was in it in some capacity. I love him dearly, and I love the life we've built together. He doesn't handle his frustration or anger or insecurities well. He has a lot of trust issues, despite the fact that I haven't done anything to merit distrust, which he will acknowledge. His trust issues stem from legitimate childhood trauma, and will frequently presume worst intentions. Sometimes he might see something small and his brain will draw conclusions like, "Wife hasn't put the dishes away," even though I never asked it, and there are plenty of times I don't put dishes away. Therefore she doesn't respect me or prioritize our relationship. Frequently in arguments, his feelings will take precedence over my own. I do my very best to listen to his feelings and acknowledge/empathize with them, but in the heat of the moment very frequently my own feelings become things for him to react to rather than listen to, and thus the discussion about his feelings continue while mine never get addressed. We've been in couples counseling for years now. Originally it was more of a maintenance thing, but over the past year it has become critically necessary. My husband sunk into a really deep depression last spring, and last summer was honestly pretty hellish for both of us. He'd find fault in the smallest of slights, like she asked me a question via IM but there's read receipt, so clearly she didn't care about my answer and doesn't care about me when I actually had seen the answer and it didn't mark a read receipt because I only looked at it through my phone's notifications, and then stopped talking to me for multiple days on end except for practical house questions via IM. He'd send passive-aggressive and manipulative messages while I was out to get me to come home, though he doesn't intend for them to be manipulative. They definitely fit the definition by any reasonable standard. If things are very extreme, he may scream in my face or knock something over. In previous years, he has punched the wall before, or, lightly, pushed me out of the way in an argument so he could get past me. I did a lot of supporting him emotionally, and often financially, when he would let me. If he's stressed, I'll try to do some housework to take something off his plate, or offer to pick up food he likes, or we'll cuddle together and watch something he likes that I don't really care about. I'll hold him while he cries, I'll pick up the slack, and I don't hold resentment about it. That's what partners do. But in the last few months, I've been going through a depression of my own. I don't lash out, but sometimes I get really sad and desperately need support. And it feels like when he's able to offer support, it very frequently comes back to haunt me later. For example, me feeling sad, him offering to pick up my favorite pizza and me taking him up on it, only for him to send me messages about how stressful and frustrating it is because the pizza wasn't ready in time and the other customers are being jerks, and by the time he gets home he's done and can't be near anyone for a while. Most recently I was having a really bad day, and he was there for me, held me while I cried, did some housework, talked me through some things. And that evening I was starting to feel a little stable, and out of nowhere he hit me with some passive-aggressive comments and started talking about how his needs, which he had not communicated to me, hadn't been met all day and how I don't meet his needs in other ways and how I prioritize everyone else in my life but not him. And I was floored and devastated, because I do prioritize him, probably more than I prioritize myself, which I'm trying to change since that isn't healthy. I think about what he wants or needs or might think of something practically all the time. But also, it was one more example of how I can't truly lean on him. I can't trust that he'll be able to support me emotionally even when he says he can. Later that same night our basement flooded, and he found it first. All I heard was slamming doors and yelling, so I went downstairs to check, and when I asked what was going on, he screamed at me, basically in my face, "What the fuck do you think? Y'all, I'm bad at boundaries. I'm really bad at them. I'm always afraid people will be mad at me or leave me when I set them, and I have plenty of real examples to back up that fear, so it's not exactly unwarranted." Over the summer, during therapy, I set some explicit boundaries of things that were not okay in arguments, things like screaming, throwing things, passive-aggressive comments, etc. I've tried, since setting those boundaries, to make it known when they were crossed, saying ouch or that wasn't an okay thing to say or I need to leave the room until we can discuss this calmly. Every inch of enforced boundaries has been painful and really hard, but I'm trying. But the screaming, and especially right after the day of supporting me and then lashing out at me without warning after, was one thing too many. We're in a crisis right now, because, among other things, I've set a firm boundary around the screaming. It can't ever happen again. It just can't. Some people in my life who have been in abusive relationships have pointed out to me that screaming in someone's face is abusive and violent even if it's not physical violence. But when I speak to my husband about it, he feels that setting this boundary is setting him, and our relationship, up to fail. He doesn't feel like he can guarantee he won't do it again, and that if this is truly a hard boundary for me, that we should end our relationship. He knows the way he's been treating me is not okay. He feels remorse for treating me that way. I know that I'm not perfect and I have work to do of my own, among other things, setting and enforcing boundaries, and untwisting myself from the pretzel shape I've become to accommodate my husband's needs/wants. And in this list of problems, I haven't mentioned all of the good things. As with any post like this, there are amazing, positive things in our relationship too. We share values, politically and personally. We play video games together and travel together and have fun together and care deeply about each other. He can be so kind and lovely. He's passionate about doing good and helping other people. I don't want my marriage to end. I didn't say those vows lightly. The idea of breaking up this relationship feels like I'm being torn apart. But I can't stay with things the way they are. I can't, and it feels like he's saying things are not going to change quickly. That he wants to change, but it's going to be a journey. I don't know what to do. Update 1. So, the first thing I want to do, before giving my update, is to thank all of you for chiming in. It can be really hard for me to be confident in my own perception of the world and of reality, and being able to get input from total strangers was enormously helpful. After a lot of back and forth of him essentially telling me he didn't know what I wanted from him, despite me articulating the above several times, while alternatively and continually pushing back on many parts of what I was asking for, and in the meantime him continuing to occasionally get upset and send manipulative, passive-aggressive messages and not respect boundaries I was setting in the moment, I told him that something drastic needed to change. I asked him for a separation, but told him I wanted to continue to work on our relationship and date through the separation. I felt that separating might be the only way he and I had a chance of saving our relationship, because living together was doing continual damage that was going to be hard to recover from. He said he needed some time to think on it. A week later he came back to therapy with me and told me he no longer wanted to be married or in a relationship with me at all. That was devastating enough on its own. At first we were kind with each other, even had a few nights of hanging out and commiserating over our shared grief. He asked for 3 months to get his finances in order before moving out, and I agreed. But then one night last weekend he picked a fight with me and again started sending manipulative, passive-aggressive messages. I thought he might have been drunk, so I messaged in the morning, but he doubled down and said even worse things. I stayed out as much as possible for the rest of the weekend, but Monday morning he was stomping around the house getting ready for work, screaming at the cat, slamming doors, and I was hiding in bed and flinching at every noise. I ended up taking a sick day because I was such a mess. That day I messaged him and told him that he was behaving in an emotionally abusive way and that I didn't feel safe in the house with him, and that we needed to revisit our timeline for him moving out. I also told him that I had been terrified to tell him this, that I was shaking even sending the message. He minimized his behavior, acted incredulous, and asked how soon. I told him end of April. He freaked out and said he needed until July. Then he did a complete 180, said a friend would lend him the money and he'd be out by early April. He spent all week packing and visiting apartments and now he's moving out this Sunday, which is a little bit of a relief, but is also such a strong rubber banding move that I'm certain it's him attempting to take control of the situation, and I'm sure his story to everyone else is that I don't care about his pain and am kicking him out early. Anyway, that pretty much brings us up to speed. I've been coming to terms, slowly, with the fact that I've been in an emotionally abusive relationship for years. Sometimes I feel horribly guilty, like I didn't do enough to try and save things, or like I'm making a big deal out of nothing and now I'm throwing my life away. I did have a really wonderfully validating one-on-one session with our couples therapist who reassured me that my perception of the situation is accurate and I'm not the one who did this to us. Sometimes I'm just incredibly heartbroken and lonely. Sometimes I'm angry that he didn't care enough to try and work at it, but I think it's likely that ultimately, this ending is for the best, as awful as that feels. Again, I really want to thank everyone here who responded to my original post. Some of the advice and comments were really hard to read, but they were really important for me to read. It was so helpful knowing I had a bunch of internet strangers backing me up on some level. I think some of my ex's minimizing has caused me to feel really unsure about how I'm perceiving the situation, potentially, even gaslighting, though likely unintentional, so having folks who could confirm that what was happening was not okay was vital. I'm lucky to have a good support system locally as well, so as awful as this all is, I might just get through it okay. Update 2. It's been about a year since my original post, 10 months since the first update. My ex did move out. Thankfully, moving day was uneventful, and then he was gone. And as many commentators predicted, when he was gone from the house it was a huge relief. I didn't have to cringe at every little sound anymore. I could breathe again. I was really, really sad, but my space was my own. And then I got laid off. No joke. Hell of a 1-2 punch right there. The past 2 years have, on the whole, been incredibly painful. The year that my marriage fell apart, and then the year I had to spend recovering from that blow. I had to job hunt while mourning the death of my relationship, and as soon as I found a new job I also found out my house needed hugely expensive repairs that, after all of this mess as well as having supported my ex not working for a year, I just didn't have the cash for. And figuring out how to be on my own for a while, I had people there to support me, but in the day-to-day, hour to hour through this mess I was ultimately on my own, and that was hard. Binging The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel helped a bit. He also kept reaching out. For a while it was occasionally chatty, but as time went on and I came more to terms with how he treated me, and how frequently his messages had a tinge of emotional manipulation to them, I distanced myself. He messaged me once to ask if I regretted our entire relationship, on the whole, or if I thought he was a terrible person, on the whole. I didn't respond to that one at all. Then he'd reach out with things like, hey, the TV I took from our living room broke, do you want it from me? Like to sell or try and fix? I've been doing my best to keep my responses short and clear, in ways that don't invite follow-up. Lately he's been wanting to have a post-mortem conversation, To which I said that I wouldn't be ready to consider whether or not that'd be a good idea until our legal ties were ended. He also just messaged to ask if he could be my roommate, because his rent is really high. I have no words. The good news, and there's thankfully quite a lot of it, the new job I got is possibly the best job I've ever had. A step down in salary, but I'm super happy with the work and the people and the location, and I've been getting rave reviews from coworkers and management, enough that I think I can probably negotiate a decent raise in a few months. I had to get a new car as well, new to me, but purchased used, since my ex got the car we shared in the split, and I was nervous about negotiating and buying a car by myself, which I'd never done before. But I did it, and managed to negotiate the dealer about $1,000 down, and I absolutely love the car. Also, I met someone new. This person reminds me of my ex in a lot of ways, things like shared hobbies and creativity and sense of humor and charm, but very different in some really important ways. He treats me really well. He's thoughtful and kind and generous, not just to me, but to everyone. In the conflicts we've had, very few, we are able to talk through them calmly, no yelling, and he shows me how much he respects and cares about my perspective and boundaries and autonomy. He's not broken and doesn't need me to fix him, and I'm not broken either, thank God. Maybe carrying a bit of extra baggage, but such is life. This relationship is still new, but it feels like a game changer for both of us, and I'm excited to see where it leads. And one more bit of good news, I will officially be divorced on Friday. Yes, the day after Valentine's Day XD, there are a few more loose ends to wrap up after that, but not many. I wanted to provide this update in part because I know it can be nice to see updates from folks, but also because I wanted to give a bit of hope to anyone who might be in a situation like mine. It can get better. It really, really can. I'm actually happy. It took time and hard work, and things aren't perfect. I'm definitely going to need a lot of time to recover financially, and I'm still sometimes processing the weight of 11 years of emotional abuse, A+ for therapy, but I'm actually truly happy. Sometimes I wonder how much of the depression I'd been feeling before he left was the result of how much emotional weight I'd been carrying for so long, his and mine, without truly being aware of it. It's so easy to feel like that dark tunnel is all there ever will be, when you're in the middle of it, but I'm out in the sunshine now, and it feels amazing. Update 3. The divorce went through the day after Valentine's, just like the court clerk promised, and I walked out of that courthouse in the same coat I got married in because of course I did. It was one of those gray winter mornings where the light is very flat and makes everything look a little like a stage set. My friend brought a thermos of coffee and we stood on the steps and I felt this space open in my chest I didn't realize had been bricked over. I went home, took the marriage license out of the little folder it had lived in and replaced it with the certified decree, put the folder back where it always sat, and then stood in the kitchen and cried into the sink like a sitcom widow. That night I invited 2 friends over, ordered the trashy takeout my ex always complained made the house smell like old carnival, and ate it on the floor with the cat watching us like we were feral. I decided what to do with my ring. It felt weird to have it tucked in a drawer like a small bomb. I took it to a jeweler who listened to the short version, nodded, and drew up a design that used the stone in a necklace that looks nothing like a ring and everything like something I bought for myself. It's simple and beautiful and doesn't carry the same weight when it rests against my collarbone. The first day I wore it I caught myself touching it absent-mindedly in a meeting and felt this little thrill, like I had repurposed a ghost. He asked for the postmortem. He waited until a week after the decree, and he was very formal in the message, which is his tell that he's actually feeling anything but. I told him I would meet him in a public place in the late afternoon and that I would be leaving after an hour. He showed up 10 minutes late and apologized to the barista for breathing. He looked exactly the same and completely different. We did small talk first, which was surreal, 2 people who built a life together asking about traffic. Then he launched into it. There was contrition, real, I think, and there were those familiar little walkbacks that used to make me feel like I was losing my mind. I know I screamed, but you know I didn't mean to make you feel unsafe, like intentions couldn't ring bells. I did not try to unbend anything. I said what I needed to say, which was that the impact mattered more than the intention and that I no longer wanted a relationship that asked me to hold both my feelings and someone else's temper like I was juggling knives. He teared up. I did not. He asked if there was any part of me that thought we might try again in a few years when we've both matured more, and I said no, and I meant it in the clean way that makes your stomach stop flipping. He told me he's starting EMDR and is trying really, really hard. I said I hoped he gets everything he's looking for. I left at the hour mark. In the parking lot I sat with my hands on the steering wheel like a person who has just passed a test and also just walked out of a burning building. The house and I are figuring each other out again. The basement, which once lived as a threat in my periphery, decided to take another shot at being a metaphor and gave me a mold bloom on the far wall, behind the shelves. I discovered it because I went down to look for printer paper and suddenly the wall looked like a science project. I had this split second where I wanted to call him even though that number is only for logistics now, and then I laughed at myself, took a picture, said out loud, okay, and called the contractor whose name my neighbor had given me. He came, took moisture readings, told me words like French drain and encapsulation and sump with a backup battery. It was very expensive and very loud for a week and now the sump pump hums like a white noise machine and I sleep through rainstorms for the first time since before the flood. The cat and I spent those demolition days in the bedroom with the door closed, watching old movies with the volume up, me in headphones pretending the world outside was an airport. The first time I went downstairs after the work was finished, the air smelled like plastic and new paint and a kind of cleanness I didn't know basements could have. At work I did the thing I said I would do, I asked for the raise. I brought numbers and compliments other people had said about me and, because I am me, I brought a backup folder in case anyone asked a question I didn't anticipate. They didn't. My boss told me she'd been planning to bring it up anyway and then said, "I'm glad you asked," and I had to go back to my desk and blink a lot. If you'd told me 2 years ago I'd be the person who walked into a meeting and said, "I'm worth more," without my hands shaking, I would have laughed you out of the room, but here we are. The best job I've ever had is still exactly that, and as it turns out I'm good at it in a way that feels like using a part of my brain I kept in storage for a while. The relationship that was new when I last wrote is still here and getting less new in a way that feels like weather I can live in. He met my friends and immediately began doing the thing where he remembers everyone's favorite drinks and returns from the kitchen with exactly that, and I find myself watching his kindness like it's a magic trick I haven't seen before, even though it's very simple. He pays attention and then he acts like he did. We did our first proper trip together, nothing dramatic, just a little cabin with a hot tub and a fireplace that we could never get to light on the first try. We hiked and ate too many gummy bears and I ugly laughed when a squirrel tried to mug him for trail mix. There was one night when we got back from a day out, I was exhausted in the particular, brittle way that for me is a warning siren, and he remarked offhandedly that I'd left a light on in the bathroom. Just that, ordinary words. My body did that old fireworks thing anyway, I could feel myself brace for the next 10 hours. He saw it, he paused, which is not a thing I had experienced with a partner before, and said, "You're safe." I'm not angry. Can I rephrase? Then he repeated that the light was on and asked if I wanted him to turn it off. I cried because the bar was so low for so long that a gentle rephrasing feels like a parade. He did not make a big deal of it. He put his hand on my knee and we breathed together and the light got turned off at some point, I think by the cat accidentally stepping on a god knows what, because she still thinks she's a raccoon. That same week, he raised his voice about a football game and I flinched reflexively. He turned the TV off immediately and asked what I needed. I said, "I need you to not yell around me," and he said, "Okay," and that was that. The thing about being with someone who hears you is that you don't have to repeat yourself until your throat is raw. My ex has tried to keep contact in that drifting way he always has. Texts about a documentary he thinks I'd like, a screenshot of a meme we would have shared in a different life, one email that said simply, "I'm sorry again," which I did not reply to because I no longer have anywhere to put his apologies. He also asked, again, if he could rent my spare room just for a few months and I laughed out loud alone in my kitchen, which felt mean for a second until I remembered that it's okay to have a spine. I told him no, and that I wouldn't be entertaining that question anymore. He sent back one of those long messages where the sentences try to braid you back into a feeling of obligation, and I did not climb into the braid. I am learning that silence is a complete answer. A few weeks ago I ran into him at the grocery store. I had a basket with pasta and lemons and flowers because apparently I am a stereotype now, and he had a cart full of sensible adult food and it felt like I had been dropped into a movie where the universe is heavy-handed. My heart did the little jump and then it didn't, and he looked at me the way you look at a person you recognize and a stranger at the same time. We did the polite nod. We did not stop and chat in front of the dairy case. In the parking lot I sat in my car and watched a lady load a watermelon into her trunk and felt this quiet relief that we had not tried to milk closure out of the yogurt aisle. There was one last big knot to untangle, a storage unit we shared that I had honestly forgotten about until the autopay email reminded me. It was a weird little time capsule full of a decade of "we might need this later." We went together during the daytime with an itemized list, and we sorted for an hour in that calm, business-like way you adopt when you can't afford to accidentally pick up a feeling. He took the gaming chair, I took the Thanksgiving platters, we both pretended we didn't see the shoebox full of photo strips from bars that don't exist anymore. There was a box with a copy of the first book we read out loud to each other, and I stood there with it in my hands and honestly thought about throwing it away for the drama, and then I put it in the donate pile because there is a theater kid still living inside me. We locked the unit, closed the account, and it felt like turning a page with gloves on. The money has been a beast, I won't lie. The house repairs plus the car plus the legal fees plus just life have made my spreadsheets look like a patient who needs 3 IVs, but it's stabilizing. I've gotten oddly good at calling utility companies and saying, "What can we do here?" in the voice of a woman who refuses to be crushed by a bill. I took on a small freelance project that let me finally replace the mattress, which is one of those upgrades that makes you think someone secretly put drugs in your bed because you wake up feeling like a human being. I'm also putting away a little each month in a silly envelope labeled adventure, because I promised myself I'd take myself somewhere ridiculous when I could. There's a postcard on my fridge for a city I've never seen, and I smile at it every time I get ice. There was one unexpected message, from someone I don't know very well but who knows my ex peripherally, asking in a kind of roundabout way if I would confirm or deny that he could be intense. I sat with it for a day. Old me would have written a dissertation and then apologized for the font. New me wrote a 3-sentence response that said I won't speak about him beyond what I've already made public, but I encourage anyone to trust their own gut if something feels off, and then I put my phone face down and went for a walk. The trees in my neighborhood are starting to leaf out, and that neon green that looks fake in the air had that wet earth smell, and I thought, look at you keeping secrets that aren't yours to tell. I realize I'm writing about 100 tiny things instead of one big dramatic turn, because the truth is, the drama was the thing I lived in for so long I forgot I could just live. There are still nights I wake up convinced I'm about to be yelled at for turning the wrong way in the kitchen, and therapy is still a lifeline that keeps me pointed at myself when I want to look anywhere else. But my home is quiet in the way good homes are. My relationship feels like a choice we both keep making because we want to, not because we're afraid. I am finding myself in silly, small ways. I painted the hallway a ridiculous saturated teal. I fixed the toilet flapper myself after a YouTube spiral. I joined a trivia team even though my brain thinks my only contribution is knowing all the lyrics to 90s one-hit wonders, which turns out to be useful at least once a month. And yesterday, it rained like it meant it, the kind of rain that used to make me queasy. I made dinner, put on a record, and there was a moment where I realized I wasn't listening for footsteps or door slams or the pitch of anyone's breathing. The sump pump did its little whir, the cat did that thing where she touches my ankle with one claw like a tiny velociraptor, and I was just there, in my house, in my life, in the exact present tense of having survived something and kept going. I don't know that there's a bigger update than that. I am still here. And I like it here. Update 4. The envelope was thick and creamy like stationery from a movie, and of course it was a save the date for a wedding where half the guest list overlapped our old life like a Venn diagram that could drink. I knew before I even flipped it over that my ex would be there, right crowd, right history, and my stomach did that elevator drop and then stabilized. I said yes, because I am tired of letting old ghosts pick my calendar. I texted my boyfriend and asked him if he wanted to come be my hand holder and +1 and general emotional service human, and he sent back, wouldn't miss it. Also, can my tie match your dress? Like the dork he is. I plan the way you plan for weather, shoes you can run in, a code word we jokingly picked that would get us to the parking lot without a scene, pineapple, because there is always a pineapple at a wedding, and a fake errand we could invent if we needed an exit ramp. The day of, I put on that jewel-toned dress that has sleeves and pockets and makes me feel like a competent pineapple myself, and we drove out to a historic barn that had been converted into a Pinterest board. Seeing him across a room again was like when you hear a song from high school you didn't like then and don't like now, but your body still knows the bass line. He looked fine. Good, even. Most people do in suits under string lights. We did the nod you give someone you owe 1,000 explanations and none at all, and then we found our table and I let myself be held, physically and metaphorically, by my boyfriend and by the fact that we were at someone else's party. 2 hours in, the band played a song my ex and I slow danced to in a kitchen once, barefoot, between a pile of unfolded dish towels and a sink full of pasta water. I felt it like a bruise you forgot about until you bump it. My boyfriend leaned down and said quietly, "Do you want to dance to something else?" And it broke me up in the right way. We waited the song out and then danced to a ridiculous pop remix that would have made our younger selves roll their eyes. It wasn't that the ache disappeared, it just had somewhere else to stand that wasn't the center of the room. He did approach me, later, carefully, like I was a wild animal that might bolt. He said, "You look well," which is a sentence one says when there are too many words and none of them useful. I said, "You too," and smiled with my teeth. He asked how work was, and I told him it's good, really good. He said he's still in therapy, and I said that's good, really good. We did not excavate. He put his hand halfway out like he might hug me, and I shifted my weight like a dancer and it became a wave instead. It didn't hurt the way I was afraid it might. It stung, and then it was over. We left when we wanted to, on our own internal schedule. No pineapple required. The adventure envelope had been quietly fattening itself on my fridge for months, and one night I was doing that thing where you stand in front of the freezer and let cold air try to solve your problems, and I decided to take myself to the city on the postcard. I love my boyfriend and we travel well together, but I wanted a solo adventure in the way you want to hear your own voice in a canyon. He understood immediately, maybe better than I did, and helped me find flights that didn't require me to sell my blood. I booked an Airbnb that had exactly 2 reviews and a terrace that promised views of rooftops, which turned out to be exactly true. I went alone. I packed one bag that I could carry by myself up 4 flights of stairs. The city smelled like coffee and exhaust and something sweet in the mornings, and I woke up before my alarm because jet lag and walked without maps, until I recognized the same graffiti twice. I ordered breakfast by pointing and learned the word for custard from an old woman in a green sweater who clucked at me kindly and tapped her own chest when she said, "For the heart." I took a tram up a hill and watched a man in a suit hold a bouquet like it was going to leap. I went into a bookstore and bought a slim book in a language I can't read because the cover was pretty and also because I wanted to be the kind of person with foreign paperbacks on her shelf. I kept catching myself doing that thing where you glance over your shoulder to share a site and there is no one there and then realizing that the person I was meant to share it with, this time, on purpose, was me. I wrote myself a postcard in a cafe, which feels cheesy until you're the one stamping it. "You did a brave thing," I wrote, and then I underlined it twice and felt ridiculous and also proud. The second day it poured without warning and I bought a cheap umbrella that flipped inside out like a fish and I laughed, alone, on a street I couldn't pronounce, and no one glared at me for my laugh being too big. I brought back a tiny watercolored print of the street below my rented terrace, and it lives in the ridiculous saturated teal hallway now, like a window to a place where I remembered I could be my own favorite company. Back home, I walked into a different job than the one I left only because I finally let myself admit out loud that I want to be listened to. I got promoted. It wasn't dramatic, I didn't kick down any doors, but there was a meeting where I said, I can lead this, and then I did. We had a crisis at work 2 weeks into my new role, the kind that used to send my nervous system into DEFCON, and I was the person who took a breath and said, okay, pause, we're going to write this on a whiteboard and break it into grains we can actually chew. It felt like building a staircase while climbing it. At one point a colleague raised his voice not at me but near me, and the old fireworks started in my chest. I said, clearly, please lower your voice, and he did, because the world is not always that other world I lived in. Afterward I went to the bathroom and put cold water on my wrists and laughed a little, alone in the mirror, because my reflection is starting to look like someone I recognize on purpose. Home had been nosing at me for weeks with projects, the way houses do. The sump pump hum is now a kind of lullaby, and the blank space downstairs stopped feeling like a threat and started feeling like possibility. I bought a roll of peel and stick flooring like a woman in an optimistic YouTube video and turned the least haunted corner of the basement into a tiny studio for making things I don't need. I hung pegboard. I bought 3 ridiculous plants whose only job is to judge me gently when I forget about them for a week. I set up a little table under a bright light and tried watercolors for the first time since 3rd grade. They were bad, and then less bad, and then one was good enough that I taped it to the wall and sent a picture to my boyfriend with the caption, I made a thing. And he responded, proud of you, which is a sentence that used to feel like a report card and now feels like a hand at the small of my back, steady. He essentially moved in for 2 weeks by accident when his building had a gas leak and everyone had to vacate. It was a soft rehearsal for a conversation we've been circling. People talk about the honeymoon stage like it's all roses and appetizers, but let me tell you, nothing will show you the truth of your compatibility like 24 hours of sirens and pizza box dinners and the delicate ballet of 2 toothbrushes in 1 cup. He arrived with a duffel, 2 shirts he swore could be worn a shocking number of times, and his stupidly fancy coffee grinder. He made my kitchen smell like Saturday. On day 3 I left a cabinet door ajar and he closed it absent-mindedly and said, hey, could you? And my body went into formation like we were about to battle. He stopped, put the coffee scoop down, and said, I love you. I'm asking because I want to not bonk my head. If you forget again, I will simply close it. This is not a referendum on your personhood. Which, okay, sounds like a script, but was just him being precise and kind. I closed the cabinet. He kissed my hair. We went on with our lives. We did have an actual argument about dishes, because life has a sense of humor. It wasn't even about dishes, obviously, it was about a loaded week and exhaustion, and we hit the rapids and then we did something wild. We both got quiet and we came back to it later when we could hear each other. I said, when you phrase things as though I've already failed, my chest tightens, and he said, I can catch that. I'll try saying what I need instead of implying you didn't do it. He actually did. He kept doing it. The bar feels less like something to trip over and more like a thing to hang fairy lights on. The cat, in her endless quest to die in the stupidest way possible, ate a ribbon off a gift bag and we had our first emergency vet night at 2:13 a.m. I woke to that specific hacking sound that makes you levitate, saw pink ribbon coming out of an animal who has no respect for vet bills, and my brain went white. My boyfriend was out of bed and getting his shoes on before I had fully articulated words. He drove without narrating his stress, held the carrier steady like it was a baby bird, paid the check without making a ceremony of it when I realized my wallet was on the counter. We sat in that chilly waiting room with the fish tank and the sad bulletin board and he made me laugh by doing a very quiet impression of the fish that looked perpetually scandalized. The cat came home ruffled and very offended. I cried into her terrible dusty fur and then into his t-shirt. He just said, of course, like I am not too much. Somewhere in there I got a text from an unknown number that turned out to be my ex's new person, asking, very politely, if I could spare 10 minutes to answer questions. I felt that old molar grind start and then stop. I wrote back that I don't discuss him beyond what I've already made public and that I encourage anyone to trust their own gut, and then, because my therapist is living rent-free in my head in the best way, I put my phone in another room, made tea, and did not reread the message 47 times looking for hidden meanings. I don't know if I did her a favor or not. I know I did not set myself on fire to keep a stranger warm, and that counts. There is a small, neat manila folder in my desk now titled Old Business, and in it live the last feral items that tethered us, a tax document that finally got corrected, a check I had to chase down like it was a squirrel, one last bill from the storage unit that was somehow owed to nobody and everybody. I wrote the last check to a number with no name and mailed it from the blue box down the block, and standing there I felt silly tears prick because bureaucracy is sometimes a form of absolution. The folder is thin. I expect it to get thinner. It feels satisfying in a way I did not anticipate, like closing a cabinet all the way and hearing the click. I'm courting my life in bigger ways, too. I joined a community choir because I was suddenly struck by a desire to make noise with strangers, and now on Tuesday nights I stand next to an alto who bakes bread and a baritone who looks like he runs ultramarathons for fun, and we sing in a church basement that smells like coffee and old carpet, and we are collectively, aggressively medium at it, and it is perfect. Last week we did a tiny performance at a farmer's market, the kind with crafts and bees and children sticky with fruit, and I saw a little girl in pink sunglasses grab her mother's hand and spin, and I thought, right, joy isn't a currency you can counterfeit. You either have it in your pocket or you don't. I do, more days than I don't. We went back to that cabin for a weekend because apparently we are becoming people with traditions. The fireplace lit on the first try, which felt like a metaphor but probably wasn't. We brought fewer gummy bears and more vegetables like real adults, and one night the sky did that unpolluted black velvet thing and we lay in the hot tub like lizards in a cauldron, and he said, I want to keep doing this, the boring way, and I said, you mean the steady way, and he said, yes, and I felt my ribcage expand like a house that's finally figured out how to breathe. On the way home we stopped at a thrift store because he cannot resist other people's old frames, and I found a small ceramic pineapple and laughed so hard I had to sit on a trunk while an older gentleman in a hat told me it was only $1, miss. I brought it home. It lives by my front door. A talisman and a joke and a promise. There are still fault lines in me that wince when something heavy lands nearby. A few nights ago, a car backfired on my street and I was on my feet before my brain woke up. Sometimes my body remembers what my mind has moved beyond. My therapist says healing is often a series of permissions, and lately I've been granting myself the one where I get to be both okay and occasionally ambushed. I am practicing it in public, at the checkout line when my card fails the first time and I do not apologize as though I've committed a felony, in meetings when I say, I don't know, let me get back to you, without offering a limb in exchange for patience, in my kitchen when I cook something just for me and eat it standing up over the counter because that's what I want in that moment. Yesterday the sky cracked open in that dramatic late summer way and I did not go listen for Rage in the Rain. I made soup, the sump pump hummed dutifully, the cat glared at the window like it had personally offended her by producing water, and I put on a record my dad used to play on Sunday mornings when the house smelled like cinnamon and soap. I looked around at the teal hallway and the plants pretending to thrive in the little studio downstairs and the ceramic pineapple and the 2 toothbrushes and thought, with real, uncomplicated gladness, this is mine, not because I earned it in some transactional way, not because I outlasted something terrible, though both of those might be true. Because I am here, and I keep choosing to be. I keep being chosen back. I don't know that there's a tidy bow to tie on all of this. Life is busy and boring and occasionally crackling around the edges. The X exists in his orbit, and I exist in mine, and sometimes those orbits cross at a grocery store or a wedding and the world does not end. I am saving for another adventure, slowly, in 5s and 10s. I am learning the alto harmony that used to make me panic. I replaced the porch light bulb by myself and did not electrocute anything important. Last week, my boyfriend fell asleep on the couch in that impossible angle men insist is comfortable, and I covered him with a blanket and felt the easiest kind of love flood me, the kind that doesn't need a defense. I'm not tallying wins and losses anymore. I'm just living. It feels, still, like sunshine. And on some mornings, when the light hits just right and the necklace warms up against my skin, I touch it and think, not a ghost. A compass. And then I make coffee and feed the cat and go sing with my people and show up to my life like it's the only one I've got, because, wild idea, it is.